The landlord told us no one would be inside. But when I unlocked the door and pushed it open, there was an old woman sitting on the couch in the living room, completely still, completely silent. The lights were off. Every curtain was drawn shut. The only light was a thin strip of grayish blue leaking through the gap in the curtains, falling across half of her face. She didn't speak. She didn't look at us. From the moment we walked in, she just sat there with her head down, eyes fixed on the floor, like something was lying there that only she could see. At the time, we assumed she was just a family member of the landlord, an old relative who happened to be there. It wasn't until later, when we started looking into the apartment, that we learned this place had a history. More than one incident, actually. But the thing I still can't shake, it wasn't the feathers on the door. It wasn't the memorial tablet on the table in the middle of the living room. It was the moment we were leaving. My colleague Zhao didn't see it, but I did. Right as the door was almost shut, she slowly raised her head and looked directly at me. No sound, just her lips moving. 2 words. Don't go. I used to work as a real estate agent in Chengdu, a major city in southwest China. Not the kind who sits in the office drinking tea. I mean the kind who's out every day showing apartments, climbing stairs, unlocking doors, negotiating prices, getting yelled at by landlords, getting stood up by tenants. When you do that job long enough, you get practical, fast. You stop trusting what landlords say. You stop trusting how bright the listing photos look. You walk in, smell the air, check the light, look at the corners, the mattress, the kitchen, the bathroom, and within a few minutes you already know if something's off. A unit with water damage has a smell. A unit that's been sitting empty for a long time has a smell too. But there's a third kind of smell, different from both of those. Not mold, not backed up drains. It's more like the moment you step inside, a chill settles over you. Like the deadness in the air had settled there long ago, and anything living felt out of place. Your body resists being there. Like the space itself has been unwelcoming to the living for a very long time. I didn't believe in any of that back then. I really didn't. In this line of work, you see everything. Properties with dark histories, distressed sales, units priced to move fast. We dealt with landlords who openly told us someone had died inside. As long as the paperwork was clean and the price was right, someone would always buy it. Someone would always rent it. In our industry, there are things you're supposed to ask up front. Has anyone died in this property? Was there a major dispute? Was there ever a violent incident? What we called a stigmatized property wasn't necessarily haunted, not in a practical sense. It just meant someone had died there under unnatural circumstances. A suicide, a homicide, an accidental death, a fall. If you failed to disclose that and it came out later, you'd have a serious legal problem. So, proper procedure required the landlord to verbally confirm the history. Sometimes you'd even record it. Of course, some landlords would hide it anyway, especially rental units. They'd figure the tenant's only staying a few months, so why bother? Keep the price a little low, and someone will always sign without asking too many questions. But then there were landlords who'd just tell you straight. This place has a history. The price reflects that. Sell it or rent it, your call. And you'd be surprised. There's always a buyer for those. Some people genuinely don't care. If it's cheap enough, they'll convince themselves it's fine. Others were property investors who'd buy it, gut it, renovate it, then flip it or rent it out. We all quietly knew those places were best left alone, but the market never ran out of people willing to touch them. The most infamous one I heard about when I was new to the job was a shared apartment in a Chengdu residential complex. A man and a woman, two strangers, moved in as roommates. Living under the same roof, close in age, they eventually started dating. What happened after that? There are different versions. Some people said it was a relationship dispute. Some said it was about money. Some said she wanted to end things and he couldn't accept it. What everyone agreed on was the outcome. He killed her. Then he walked to a window and jumped. 2 lives, 1 apartment. That property circulated through our internal groups for a while. Someone gave it a dark nickname, something like the ultimate cursed apartment. I know that sounds disrespectful, but people in this industry aren't all the same. Some are scared, some treat it like a selling point. Some actually use the notoriety to attract bargain hunters. When I first heard about it, I just felt it was grim. But it was someone else's listing, not my problem. Until I walked into one myself. That apartment was the one that made me understand some properties are cheap for a reason. It was an afternoon showing. My colleague Zhao and I were taking a client to view an apartment. The client had recently moved to Chengdu for work. Limited budget, wanted something near his office, didn't want to pay too much. Honestly, we saw this type every day. Long list of requirements, not enough money. They'd always find something to complain about. Either the place was too old or the price was still too high. The apartment was in an older residential complex. Not falling apart, but nothing close to new either. The exterior walls had gone dark with age. The hallway lights were dim. Walking in, there was that damp smell that older buildings always carry. The landlord had told us in advance that the key was with us and no one would be inside. So we were relaxed when we got to the door. But I felt something was off the moment we reached it. There were chicken feathers stuck all over the door frame. Not 1 or 2, both sides of the frame, across the top, around the security door. Feathers everywhere, bunched in clusters, dried and grimy against the door. There were also red stains on the door. At first, the client thought it was tomato sauce. Zhao looked at it and said nothing. Neither did I. We both knew it probably wasn't tomato sauce. In Sichuan province and parts of southern China, chicken blood and feathers are sometimes used in folk practices meant to cleanse a space, to ward off something unclean. You might see a little blood near a door when a family slaughters a chicken at home, and that's nothing unusual. But this was deliberate. Spread across the door in a way that no one does by accident. This was put there for whatever was inside the apartment. The client frowned and asked, "What's all this?" Zhao recovered quickly and smiled. Probably the landlord's family had someone come do a cleansing. Some older folks around here are particular about these things. Don't worry about it. Let's just go in and take a look. I nodded along. That's the job. As long as the client hasn't turned around and walked away, you keep things moving. I pulled out the key. When I inserted it, the lock cylinder turned stiffly, like it hadn't been used in a long time. The door swung open into darkness. Not the kind of dark that comes from bad lighting. The kind that comes from every single curtain being pulled completely shut, with no light getting in at all. My first thought was that maybe someone from the landlord's family was inside cleaning. But there was no sound. No sound at all. Zhao stepped in ahead of us and called out, "Hello? Anyone home?" No answer. The client stayed at the doorway, not eager to step inside. I reached over and felt along the wall for the light switch. The bulb flickered once and went dark again, like a loose connection. I pressed it twice more before the ceiling light in the living room finally came on. When the light came on, all 3 of us stopped. There was an old woman sitting on the couch. She was just sitting there, head down, staring at the floor, completely motionless. We had called out before entering. She hadn't responded. We'd made enough noise opening the door to wake someone sleeping. She hadn't reacted at all. In that moment, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. Zhao startled too and blurted out, "Oh, ma'am, you're home." She didn't say anything. Her eyes stayed fixed on the floor in front of her, as if she hadn't heard us come in at all. The client's expression had already shifted. I scrambled to explain. Probably a family member of the landlord, hard of hearing maybe? Before I finished saying it, 3 people came out of one of the bedrooms, 2 men and a woman. By their ages, they looked like her children. They saw us and didn't seem surprised at all. One of the men just asked, "You're the agents?" Zhao said, "That's right, we called this morning, here to show the apartment." The man nodded and said, "Go ahead and look." Then, slowly, he walked over and pulled open the living room curtains. Light came in, but the room felt worse. The windows were covered in old blue UV blocking film, the kind that was popular in apartments 15 or 20 years ago. Over time, that film discolors. The light it lets through isn't bright. It's a flat, cold gray blue. With that light filling the room, everything looked like it had been submerged in cold water. The furniture, the walls, the floor tiles, the old woman on the couch. Every surface looked drained of color. Now that I could see her clearly, I noticed how loose the skin of her face was and how wide her eyes were held open. She was still looking down at the floor, her lips slightly parted, like she was trying to say something she couldn't get out. The client was getting uncomfortable. He lowered his voice and asked me, "Has someone been living here the whole time?" I was about to answer when my eyes caught something in the middle of the living room. There was a table, not pushed against a wall, not near a window, just sitting in the center of the room. And on top of it was a memorial tablet, a small wooden plaque bearing the name of the deceased, used in Chinese households to honor someone who has passed. In Chinese, these are called spirit tablets, and they carry the weight of the dead person's presence in the home. Placing it dead center in the living room was unthinkable, like turning your home into a funeral altar. In a Chinese home, something like that belongs against a wall, in a quiet corner, or inside a dedicated cabinet, not in the middle of a room where people walk through every day. This wasn't a decorative object. This wasn't a normal placement. It was like the entire room was arranged around it. The client saw it too. His face hardened. He turned to the landlord's family and asked, "Why is this here?" No one answered. The 3 of them stood there as if the question hadn't been asked. Zhao jumped in. "They're probably still organizing things, getting ready to move it. If you end up renting, all of this will be cleared out. Don't worry." The client didn't respond, but I could tell he was already thinking about leaving. We pressed on anyway. That's the job. The apartment was a 3-bedroom, a good layout actually. At its normal price, it shouldn't have been that cheap. But the further we walked, the more wrong it felt. Every single bedroom door had a yellow paper talisman, the kind used in Chinese Taoist and folk rituals for protection, stuck to its frame. The bedrooms, yes, but also the kitchen doorway and the bathroom doorway. Yellow paper, with symbols written in red or black ink. You see these sometimes. People put them up for protection or to ward off bad energy. 1 or 2 in a home isn't unusual. But every doorway in the entire apartment? That didn't feel like a family seeking blessings. It didn't feel like they were keeping something out. It felt like they were keeping something in. The client had seen them too. His voice dropped another register. This isn't one of those places where someone died, is it? Not one of the landlord's family members said a word. They just stood there and watched us. Zhao's forced smile was visibly cracking. No, they probably just have strong beliefs. Some families are like that." Even I didn't believe what he was saying. We kept moving toward the back of the apartment. I was walking beside the client. Zhao was slightly ahead. When we reached the doorway of the last bedroom, I felt it, a crawling sensation up my back. Clear and sudden, like someone was standing right behind me, close, maybe about 6 feet, and staring directly at the back of my head. I turned around. I almost made a sound. The old woman from the couch was standing there. She had moved without any of us hearing a single step. Just minutes earlier, she had been completely still on the couch, and now she was in the hallway, less than 6 feet away from me. She wasn't looking at the floor anymore. She was staring directly at me and Zhao. I still remember that look. It wasn't the unfocused gaze of someone elderly and confused. It wasn't curiosity. It was cold, flat, intensely focused. Like she was afraid we were going to find something, or afraid we were going to take something with us when we left. The client turned and saw her. The blood drained from his face. Zhao laughed it off as quickly as he could. "Oh, ma'am, you scared us. Be careful, don't trip." She didn't say anything. She just kept watching us. None of us wanted to be there anymore. The client said plainly, "I'm done looking," and he walked out. Nobody stopped him. The three of us left as fast as we could without actually running. As I pulled the door shut behind me, I looked back one last time. She was still standing in the living room. The blue light through that old window film was washing over her, half of her face in flat gray, the other half in shadow. The spirit tablet on the table was right behind her. And then the door closed. We went downstairs. The client left without another word. That deal was dead. Zhao and I stood outside smoking. Neither of us said anything for a while. Halfway through the second cigarette, Zhao finally said, "That apartment has something wrong with it." I said, "We should look into it." Back at the office, we started digging into the property's history. At first, what we found seemed unremarkable. An elderly man had died in the apartment. The age, the family name, and the estimated time of death all aligned with what we'd seen. It appeared to be the husband of that old woman. On its own, an elderly person dying at home isn't necessarily a red flag. It's not uncommon. If it's a natural death, many people can accept that. But Zhao wasn't satisfied. He said, "If it was just the old man passing naturally, why are there chicken feathers on the door? Why is every room covered in talismans? Why is the spirit tablet sitting in the middle of the living room?" He kept asking around. And then he found out something else. Before the current occupants, there had been a young man renting the apartment, living alone. One night, he was asleep in the bedroom. At some point, he fell off the bed. That sounds ordinary enough. Everyone's fallen off a bed. At worst, you get a bruise, maybe a bloody nose, maybe a gash on your head. This young man hit the floor and never got up. By the time he reached the hospital, they couldn't find a clear cause. No obvious injuries, no underlying conditions, no heart attack, no stroke, no signs of poisoning. The final conclusion was accidental death. He fell off his bed. He died. I didn't say anything for a long time after Zhao told me that. Zhao crushed out his cigarette and said, "Now you understand why she kept staring at the floor." I hadn't put it together until then. He said, "Remember how she was sitting on the couch when we first came in? The whole time, she was staring at the floor, like something was lying there that only she could see." I remembered. From the moment we walked in, she sat there with her head down, eyes fixed on the floor, not moving, not speaking. A few days later, Zhao came down with a fever, a bad one. He was out for 3 days. He said he kept having the same dream. He was back in that living room, curtains closed, that blue light everywhere, the old woman on the couch, head down, staring at the floor. Every time he tried to walk over and ask her what she was looking at, she would slowly lift her head and say to him, "You can't see it?" He'd wake up, drenched in sweat every time. I asked him later if he'd ever go back to that apartment. He told me if I wanted to go back, I could go alone. He was never setting foot in that place again. I don't know what happened to that apartment in the end. It probably got rented out eventually. It probably got sold. In this industry, nothing stays on the market forever. If the price is low enough, someone will always take it. The agents who were scared off get replaced by new agents. The tenants who walked away get replaced by tenants who didn't know to ask. But after that day, I added something to my routine. Every time I approach a door I'm about to unlock for a client, I check the frame first. Feathers, red stains, paper talismans, mirrors, string, ash from incense. Any one of those things on its own might have an innocent explanation. But if you're seeing several of them together, stop trying to explain it away. Some properties, you don't need to prove whether or not something is wrong with them. You just need to recognize that they're not suitable for the living. I encountered something similar one more time after that. The client that day was unusual. He didn't announce it right away, but it became clear fairly quickly that he was a Taoist practitioner. He came in with his hair in a small knot, dressed simply, spoke slowly, with a stillness about him. In Chengdu, religious practice is varied. Buddhism, Taoism, folk ritual, you encounter all kinds of people in this line of work. Some people just carry themselves differently, and you can sense it. That day, we were taking him to see a unit in another older complex. We'd just entered the ground floor hallway, hadn't even called the elevator yet. He stopped. He stood at the base of the staircase, staring at a particular spot. Just a corner of the landing, where the paint was peeling and someone had left a few cardboard boxes stacked against the wall. He stared at it for a long time. Long enough that we started to feel awkward. I asked, "Is something wrong?" He didn't answer right away. A few more seconds passed. Then he turned and said, "Let's go up." We got in the elevator. The moment the doors closed, his expression shifted. He asked us, "Did someone die in this building? An older man?" Zhao and I looked at each other. I said, "We're not aware of anything involving the unit we're showing you." He said, "I'm not asking about the unit." My back went cold. He continued, "There was an old man standing at the base of that staircase just now. I wasn't sure at first if he was a person or something else, so I watched him for a moment. Then I realized none of you could see him." The elevator went silent. I could hear the faint hum of the cable. My colleague, trying to hold it together, said, "Are you sure you didn't just—" The man looked at him briefly. He didn't argue. He just said, "Be careful in this line of work. Just because a specific unit has no history doesn't mean the building is clean." The showing was over quickly. He looked around for a few minutes and left. Afterward, we couldn't help ourselves. We asked around about the building, and we found something. A few years earlier, an elderly man had been living alone in one of the units in that same building. A fire broke out. It spread badly. Almost everything inside was destroyed. The old man never made it out. The burned unit wasn't the one we'd been showing, but it was in the same building. That was when I understood what the practitioner had meant. Just because the unit itself is fine doesn't mean the building is. Sometimes whatever's left behind isn't in the apartment. It's in the stairwell. It's in the elevator. It's in the spaces you pass through every single day without ever really looking at. In those same years, I also dealt with one villa that had no confirmed death on record. At least, nothing we could find. But it was one of the most uncomfortable properties I ever walked into. The villa was large. The price was low. Unreasonably low for the size and location. The landlord said it was an urgent sale. All the paperwork was in order. On paper, nothing was wrong. A few of us went to assess it. When the door opened, the smell hit immediately. Not the usual stale air of an empty property. Mold. Stale cigarette smoke. Something sweet and rotting. And underneath all of it, a human smell. The kind that builds up when a space hasn't been ventilated in a very long time. All of it compressed together. My stomach turned on the first breath. The furniture was still inside. The beds were still there. Every mattress had large, dried stains across the surface. The walls were spotted with mold. The curtains hung limp and gray, like they hadn't been washed in years. The carpet was tacky underfoot. The bathroom mirrors were filmed over with watermarks. We walked through the whole place, and nobody wanted to stay a second longer than necessary. We found out afterward what the property had been used for. It had been operating as an illegal, off-the-books establishment, the kind where services were arranged behind closed doors, the kind nobody talks about openly, until it was raided and the property ended up on the market. That villa taught me something. Not every place that makes you deeply uncomfortable has a ghost. Sometimes when people do enough of the wrong things in one place for long enough, the place keeps it. Not necessarily a spirit, maybe just a smell, maybe just an atmosphere. Something in the air that your body registers before your mind does. You walk in and you feel it, not physically dirty, but wrong in a way that's harder to explain. I eventually left the real estate business. Lots of reasons. The money was never easy. The work was exhausting. But if you ask whether those properties had anything to do with it, honestly, a little. Because after enough years of it, I noticed I'd become more sensitive, more attuned. Every time I walked into a new unit, I'd scan it before I said anything to the client. Are the curtains fully drawn in the middle of the day? Is there incense ash somewhere it shouldn't be? Are there nails driven into the doorframe for no obvious reason? String tied around something? Is there anything placed in the center of the living room that shouldn't be there? When the landlord talks, are their eyes moving away from yours? And most importantly, if there are elderly people, young children, or animals in the space, are any of them behaving strangely? None of these things can go into a contract. None of them hold up as evidence. But everyone who's worked in this industry long enough knows. Some properties, you can negotiate the price. Some properties, you can work out the terms. But some properties, you shouldn't even open the door. People have asked me since, that apartment with the feathers on the door, do you think it was actually haunted? I don't know what became of it. It probably found a tenant. These things always do. But sometimes I still think about that old woman sitting on the couch with her eyes fixed on the floor. Was she watching the spot where her husband had died? Was she watching the place where that young tenant had fallen from his bed? Or was there something there? Something that had been there for a long time that she could see and we couldn't. I don't have those answers. What I do have is one clear memory. The day we left, the client moved fastest. Zhao followed close behind. I was the last one out the door. Right as it was almost shut, I looked back through the gap one more time. She was standing in the living room, the spirit tablet on the table behind her. That old blue film on the windows casting everything in that flat, waterlogged light, half of her face gray, the other half dark. She looked like an old photograph that had been left in water too long. And in the last moment before the door closed completely, I saw her lips move. No sound, but I could read it clearly. She said, "Don't go." I don't know if she was asking us not to leave her, or telling us that she herself could never leave. So if you're ever apartment hunting and you come across a unit that's priced noticeably below everything around it, don't just get excited about the deal. Ask why it's cheap. If the landlord can't give you a straight answer, if the agent's explanation sounds too polished, and if the place has things in it that don't add up, feathers on the doorframe, red stains that nobody can explain, a spirit tablet sitting in the middle of the room, talismans on every single doorway, take my advice. Don't think of it as a bargain. Sometimes that low price isn't an opportunity. It's the cost someone else already paid. To hear more real, unexplained stories like this, consider subscribing. For a new channel like this one, it really does make a difference. Thank you.